You've heard people who seem a little paranoid, to be honest, talk about a coup. Now they don't seem quite as crazy. In a new interview, former FBI Deputy Director Andy McCabe admitted that Justice Department officials discussed launching an administrative coup d'etat against the President of the United States. The official, says McCabe, considered asking the President's cabinet to invoke the never-invoked 25th Amendment to the Constitution as a way to remove Trump from power, obviously without an election or an impeachment hearing. Fox Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is on the story and has details for us tonight. Catherine?
Well, thank you, Tucker. McCabe went on the record confirming our reporting from October that he believed the Justice Department's second in command was serious about recording the president and invoking the 25th Amendment. The timing matters because May 2017 is a pivotal month in the Russia probe. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein was just 2 weeks into the job when President Trump fired FBI Director James Comey. 8 days later, Rosenstein appointed the special counsel. McCabe also tells CBS News that after Comey was fired, the FBI launched an obstruction of justice case, in addition to the FBI's ongoing investigation into alleged Russia collusion. In a statement, the Justice Department seemed to stop short of denying Rosenstein talked about removing the president. Quote, the Deputy Attorney General never authorized any recording that Mr. McCabe references. Based on his personal dealings with the president, there's no basis to invoke the 25th Amendment. In a tweet, President Trump hit back. Disgraced FBI Acting Director Andrew McCabe pretends to be a poor little angel, when in fact he was a big part of the crooked Hillary scandal and the Russia hoax, a puppet for lying James Comey. And for some context, Andrew McCabe was fired last year for lying to federal investigators. That case is now with the U.S. Attorney here in Washington. Tucker.
Catherine Herridge for us. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. John Summers is a former communications director for Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, and he joins us. And John, thanks very much for coming on.
You bet.
So take the party IDs off the players in this. Here you have federal law enforcement discussing removing a president without an impeachment or an election. That sounds like something that happens in a third world country, doesn't it?
Well, it's something, and I'm not going to defend any one individual in this situation, because these are very serious conversations that they were having. But it does appear that those are conversations they were having.
Yes.
And those are based off of the Constitution, right? It's the 25th Amendment of the Constitution, which does act as a safeguard should we ever run into that situation. So for me,
run into what situation?
Run into a situation
where you don't like the president or disagree with his Russian policy,
or where you feel like the president is incapable of doing the job. And so I think I don't have a problem that they had these discussions. At the end of the day, they landed at no. And I think that's the important thing to remember. So the system worked the way it was supposed to as it relates to whether or not to remove the president.
No, because if you find yourself as an executive branch employee disagreeing with the policies of the person for whom you work, you leave, you quit. And you can state so publicly if you want. You have the right to do that. What you're not allowed to do is try to take power from the one elected guy in the entire branch of government, because that's not democratic. It's the opposite of democratic, but that's what they tried to do.
Agreed. But what you're saying is that they were considering it because they didn't like the policies, and I don't think that's the case at all.
Why were they considering
There's a genuine concern about how Russia was involved in the 2016 election.
Okay, but so the amendment was written after Woodrow Wilson suffered a stroke in office and his wife wound up running the country. I guess she was a fine president, but we didn't want to repeat that. So this was specifically written, and every lawyer knows this, including the ones at the FBI, for a president who's incapacitated, not for a president whose policies you find repugnant or disagree with or don't. You know what I mean? Just because he's not a neocon doesn't mean that you can remove him from power.
I agree. And again, I don't think that's what they were thinking about. There was big concern. Again, when you look at the timing of McCabe going into office, and again, he's obviously a flawed messenger in many ways, but when you look at the time that he was elevated to his position was right after James Comey was fired. And why was James Comey fired? As the president said himself, because he wanted the Russia investigation to end.
Okay, but
clearly there was a concern.
But the other way, well, there was a concern because a guy they liked who was their boss got fired, which is absolutely the prerogative of this or any president to fire his own employees if he wants, for whatever reason he wants. And if you don't like it, impeach him or vote against him.
Unless it's viewed as obstruction of justice.
Okay, but but under no plausible scenario could it be. I mean, because of course the FBI director is free to say whatever he wanted to congressional committees or the Mueller investigation or write a book, which indeed he did. So it's not obstruction of justice. It's not going to prevent justice from working its way to its conclusion. I just wonder, why are liberals all of a sudden defending this radically empowered federal law enforcement agency, you don't see this as a threat to the Kamala Harris administration 2 years from now, for real?
Yeah, no, and I get the question. I don't see liberals defending this. I think what we're defending is protecting the investigation. So we have a good understanding of exactly what Russia was doing in the 2016 elections and whether they were aided by anyone here in the United States. And part of that question centers on the President of the United States and some of his closest associates.
But we've spent 2 years looking into that, and the conclusion of the Senate committee that's looked into it is there's no collusion.
That's not true. That's what the chair of that committee said. That wasn't a statement from the committee as a whole. Okay. That's what the chair said.
Is there a point at which...
The ranking member, just to be fair, the ranking member said he disagreed. So
no, the ranking member did not say that...
And official court documents have come to the conclusion that there was some collusion. We saw that in Manafort documents, and we've also seen it in the Roger Stone documents. Whether that collusion rises to the president is the question.
Okay. Just for the record, there's no, quote, collusion with Russia in the Roger Stone indictments. Okay, no one has been indicted for colluding with anybody so far.
Acting as a liaison between WikiLeaks on behalf of the Russia.
But that is not, look, it's not a crime and it's not collusion. But leaving that aside, I just want to end on this. Does it really honestly, as a citizen, not bother you that a federal law enforcement agency discussed removing the President of the United States by non-democratic means for basically disagreeing with them and firing their boss? That doesn't bother you at all?
The premise of your question, if that was the case, would bother me. That's not what that was about.
How about let's leave the last part off. Whatever it was about.
I'm comforted by the fact that they had the discussion as provided by the 25th Amendment, and they landed on no. So again,
it's like saying, I talked about killing my wife. I didn't do it. You know what I mean? And there's a difference. Like, I'm not a murderer. It's like, oh, yeah, but you discussed it. What does that say about you? Something ominous, no?
What it says, it's less about the people and more about the concerns they have about the president who's trying to stop an investigation into his campaign. If he's got nothing to hide, he should have nothing to fear.
Okay. Give me your email password if you've got nothing to We'll talk about it off air. John, thank you very much.
Thank you.
In his 60 Minutes interview, McCabe admits that his attempt to undermine the president began almost immediately after his boss, Jim Comey, was fired. And it was, of course, due to Russia.
I was speaking to the man who had just run for the presidency and won the election for the presidency, and who might have done so with the aid of the government of Russia, our most formidable adversary on the world stage. And that was something that troubled me greatly.
How long was it after that you decided to start the obstruction of justice and counterintelligence investigations involving the president?
I think the next day I met with the team investigating the Russia cases, and I asked the team to go back and conduct an assessment to determine where are we with these efforts and what steps do we need to take going forward.
Alan Dershowitz is a retired Harvard Law School professor. He's the author of the book, The Case Against the Democratic House Impeaching Trump, and he joins us tonight. Professor, thanks very much for coming on. So now the suspicions of many are confirmed by one of the players in it. The Department of Justice discussed trying to remove the president using the 25th Amendment. What's your reaction to that?
Well, if that's true, it is clearly an attempted coup d'etat. Relating to what your former guest said, let's take the worst case scenario. Let's assume the President of the United States was in bed with the Russians, committed treason, committed obstruction of justice. The 25th Amendment simply is irrelevant to that.
Right.
That's why you have an impeachment provision.
Exactly.
The 25th Amendment is about Woodrow Wilson having a stroke. It's about a president being shot and not being able to perform his office. It's not about the most fundamental disagreements. It's not about impeachable offenses. And any Justice Department official who even mentioned the 25th Amendment in the context of President Trump has committed a grievous offense against the Constitution. The framers of the 25th Amendment had in mind something very specific, and trying to use the 25th Amendment to circumvent the impeachment provisions or to circumvent an election is a despicable act of unconstitutional power grabbing. And you were right when you said it reminds me of what happens in third world countries. Look, these people may have been well-intentioned. They may believe that they were serving the interests of the United States, but you have to obey the law, and the law is the Constitution. And the 25th Amendment is as clear as could be. Incapacity, unable to perform office. That's what you need. That's why you need 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate agreeing. And it has to be on the basis of a medical or psychological incapacity, not on the basis of even the most extreme crimes, which there's no evidence were committed. But even if they were, that would not be a basis for invoking the 25th Amendment.
So this is not simply, right.
And I challenge any left-wing person to get on television and to defend the use of the 25th Amendment. I challenge any of my colleagues who are in the Get Trump at Any Cost camp to come on television and justify the use of the 25th Amendment other than for physical or psychiatric incapacity.
I bet they're doing that right now. But this is an attack on our system, I would say, not just on the president. Alan Dershowitz, thank you very much.
It's an attack on our system. It's an attack on the Constitution. Thank you.
Scary.